Hey guys, I hope you're all doing well. Pastor Robert here, Josh Dewberry. This is our first official, podcast, video cast. I want to call it Pastor's Corner, where we get together every week and we just discuss different Christian topics. Sometimes maybe that's some of the things that were said in the sermon, or just the things that are going on in the world today from a Christian perspective. And each week it'll be something new, and hope you guys enjoy it and it lifts your spirit and you walk away and just a little bit more blessed than you were before you watched. It turns out that Josh has some questions for me, because one of the things that we do here at Excel is that Sunday evening we get together and we discuss the message of the sermon in the morning before we go to prayer meeting. And I always thought that was a good thing to do, because I don't know about you, but I've been in church, as sitting in the pew like everyone else, and sometimes the pastor would say something, and it was just, I'd write it down, and I have so many questions about it, and I would have loved to have gotten into a discussion about that particular point, but you never get a chance to do it. So I always like, now that we come together Sunday night and we get a chance to discuss it. But last Sunday night doesn't always go the way you expect it to go. So our first official, pastor with the corners, Pastor's Corner, will be dealing with what we talked about Sunday night. And I'm going to hand it to Josh. He's going to moderate this thing by answering some of the questions. Answering some of the questions I might have left everybody with. So
one of the discussions we had Sunday night that I think kind of the discussion went back and forth a lot about was what we do on Sunday mornings and who that's actually intended for.
Yes.
I agree. You agree. There were several in the crowd that, said it's for Christians, but what does that mean whenever you say that? When you say Sunday morning worship service, Sunday morning preaching is for Christians, who are you talking about exactly? Yeah,
that actually came up when we were talking, I believe, when we were talking about, are we allowed to invite our friends? So I said, well, church is for Christians. And it has a lot to do with my background, compared to everyone's background here. To me, a non-Christian for that discussion were people that weren't Christian, Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus. They don't identify with Christianity in any sort of way. So inviting them to worship is like the odd man out. They don't believe in Jesus. It would be completely foreign to them. So when we have an outreach or a friend day, those aren't necessarily the people that we're targeting to reach. Now, if we wanted to reach them, we could create a movement, an outreach or something to reach those people. But Sunday morning isn't really for them. Right. Now, your friends that that aren't Christian, I still meant that they're Christian too. Not that they're real Christians, not that they're born again and they're going to heaven, but their worldview is Christian. They understand who Jesus is. They might have been raised in church and they're just not living right, or even atheists in this area, me personally, would say, well, they're Christian, even though they're not followers of Jesus for sure, and they're not right with God. But even their atheistic beliefs are tainted with Christian thought.
Right. Yeah, their basic morals come from Christianity.
Correct. So if you invited that atheist into church, they understand who Jesus is. You know what I mean? I don't have to preach the very basics of Christianity every time someone walks in the door, because everybody in here doesn't believe in Christianity, then sermons are more apologetic. But we in Excel, and I would say this whole area, I would argue that everybody's a Christian here. Not that everybody's actually a Christian, but do you know anybody in the area that doesn't identify some way, shape, or form with Christianity?
I don't think so. I think everybody, even those people who say that they're complete atheists, like I said, they have some foundational understanding of Christianity, and their morals, their values, their life, their worldview is shaped in some way by Christianity. So
That's really what I mean when I say, well, everybody's Christian out here. I know not everyone's a Christian. It's kind of like identify. Everybody identifies as Christian to some degree. If you gave them a questionnaire and you asked what religion you are and they had to do multiple choice and it said Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, Christian, they're likely to hit Christian, even though they may not. Kind of like people identify as a woman when they're a man. We know you're not a woman, you're a man, but you're identifying as a woman. And there are a lot of people who identify as Christian that aren't really Christian. Right. Yeah. And you can invite them to church. Church will fit in, and work. So that's what I was talking about.
Okay.
And that's just my own personal opinion. Some people would disagree with me and think that during the time of worship, you can invite anybody. And and that's okay. I mean, we're not going to tell anyone to leave. It's just if I had a friend that was Muslim or Hindu, I would spend more time trying to convert him to Christ before I brought him to church. Before I brought him to church. And even if he was a seeker, after my conversations with him or her, they're starting to understand Christianity a little bit more, but they haven't really converted. I might invite him to church to let him see what's going on with inside the building. But for the most part, it's for Christians.
Yeah,
for Christians.
So one of the things that really kind of pushed that button, I guess, and brought on that discussion was the Cowboy Church video you shared Sunday morning during your sermon, the trading stained glass for spit cups.
Yeah.
And then the talking about, you got to go work your farm, just come on in with your manure on your boots.
Yes.
What, how far do we go? How far do we move that line for what's acceptable inside the church to, I guess, make people more comfortable, to make people come as you are, that idea of the seeker-friendly, come as you are type movement. How far are we willing to move that line? I mean, to me, partly kind of tiptoes down that line of sinfulness.
It can, and this is a tough topic because everybody has an opinion. If I was being honest as a pastor, and that no matter what church I was leading, you got to know your congregation and you got to know the mission of that particular congregation. Who's in the community? Who's likely to walk inside this building? And who do we truly want to reach? In a cowboy church, it seemed like they were trying to reach people that were very, very nominal in their faith. Not because they were cowboys, but because of the slogans that were being used to reach them. Obviously, if you're going to say, come to our church because we've traded stained glass windows for spit cups, you're not trying to reach mature believers in Christ, right? I can't imagine that that's your target audience, So if your target audience is nominal Christians or seekers, or you're trying to reach people that will never step foot in the church, and that might draw them into the church, I would say that that's probably an acceptable thing. But I also believe there's a level of danger, because if they come in and you keep it that way from the beginning to the end, when do they ever really hear the true message of Christ? Right. So they stay nominal Christian. You know what I'm saying? They never grow up inside their faith. And I guess that's, if you watch the sermon, what I was saying was, in our zeal to reach the lost or the marginal believer, we leave Jesus out. We don't intend to, but we do, because you're reaching marginal believers. And what brought them in the door was the spit cup. So you better have spit cups. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And then the moment that's not working anymore, you got to have a bigger spit cup. And then the moment that doesn't work anymore, you need a bigger cowboy hat, because you're reaching people with a gimmick and not with Christ. And I'm not saying that that's what that church was doing. I'm just saying that I believe that there's a danger there when we use gimmicks, if you will, to bring people in the building and never actually give them Jesus, and I'm not saying that they don't give them Jesus, but it becomes a real temptation. And we've seen it in a lot of big churches, that do you ever really get the true Jesus? What we call seeker-friendly churches. And seeker-friendly churches have a value in certain areas because you'd have to know your population. How many people here are in Excel seekers versus how many people are mature Christians, and what's the best way to reach them. So I think it's dangerous, but it's not unacceptable. Maybe the spit cup thing becomes a little profane, as if because grace is, because Jesus has come and we live in a time of grace and we live in a time of we can approach him with confidence. Does that mean we're allowed to approach him any way we want? That's the manure on the boot thing I was trying to say is like, I get it. Come to church. Come as you are. If you're out in the morning and you're driving down the road and you get a flat tire and you fix your tire and you're all full of grease, come to church. If all you have is jeans and a T-shirt, then come to church. Come as you are. But to say, you got manure on your boots, you're welcome. What is it? What are you really communicating? Are you really communicating come as you are? Or are you communicating that it doesn't matter at all how you come before God?
Right.
You get to choose how you do it. He doesn't. Right. He's not holy anymore. He's not, there's no sense of reverence anymore. And I think that becomes dangerous because then you have to keep that up. And the more you have to keep it up, the more you become a slave to the gimmick. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. One of the lines that you said during your sermon Sunday was, when we have Friend Day here in a couple of weeks, why should I invite my friends? And it's because over here we talk about Jesus, we praise Jesus, yes. we teach Jesus, we preach Jesus. Why do you think? And I guess you kind of answered it already. It's a numbers game ultimately, but why do you think so many churches have kind of drifted from that? I guess it seems like so many churches have gotten into the gimmicks and they've broadened their gimmicks so far that Jesus is gone. Or not, maybe let me rephrase that question. How do we get the church, not necessarily our church, but the church proper, global? How do we get the church back to Jesus and get rid of all the gimmicks?
I don't know. Some thoughts cross my mind, whether they're right or good, or I don't know. But you start with your own. You start with your own people, and you go from there. My history behind this is when I first got into ministry, I was going to an amazing church, Woodlawn Church in the Nazarene, and the seeker-friendly movement had just begun. I'm in seminary, and seeker-friendly movement is what we're talking about, is a church designed to reach seekers. They're not really born again, but they're Christian-ish, and they won't come to church. But what can you do to get them inside the doors, and then give them Jesus? And it makes a whole lot of sense. And I read a lot of books on it. I was ready to do it. I actually tried to implement it. But what you find is, like I was saying before, you have to keep up the gimmick. You do, because they're really not there for the right reasons. Now, don't get me wrong. People come to know Christ that way. Lots of people have come to know Jesus through, seeker-friendly environments, But there's, as I keep saying, there's that danger, and where where you cross the line, I just make sure that I look at the context of the character of the congregation that I've been called to serve, and then serve them. So if the context, you moved me to New York City, Manhattan, seeker-friendly. Manhattan, you got Muslims, Buddhists, Jewish people. I mean, just in one area of standing online for anything, you have people from all over the world, all different faiths, all different understandings. So, yeah, I think at that stage, you begin to blend because you're trying to reach. But I don't know. It's a good question. It's good. I just wanted everybody to know that invite your friends to church. You know, they don't have to be Christian because they already are. I know that's messing with people, but you know they're already identified with the idea of Christianity, and let Jesus do the rest. And you know, we just go from there, and let's just not get sucked into fads or things. And our culture has, you know, our culture. The church is becoming more and more like the culture. In our zeal to reach the culture, we become like the culture. It makes so much sense because you're trying to reach the culture. But at the same time, we got to be careful that the culture doesn't change us, particularly when the culture is ungodly. You know, when the culture is unholy and you start crossing that line.
You know, something I think about, we talk about church history and church tradition a lot. The gospel of Christ drew people into the church for 1950 years roughly.
Right.
It was really 50s, 60s when we really started seeing the move into the fads and the Jesus people of the 60s and 70s and the seeker-friendly movement and the youth group movement. And, you know, as a youth guy, it hurts my feelings to say that, but, you know, the leaders that are struggling to keep the church going today are the people who were the youth group kids 20 years ago. And so all those movements happened. And that's what I think about whenever you say, you know, we got to avoid all the fads. Well, all those fads, the past 70 years or so is when they happened. And,
That's right.
And that's why the church is in the state it's in, I think, in a lot of places. You go to the places in the world where the church is growing at its most rapid, or its greatest pace. And it's those places where that's what they're doing.
Jesus is the focus.
It's Jesus.
Jesus is the focus.
And you know, here we grow up kind of, you know, with those Christian people, those people that are around it. But in those other countries, they grow up pagan. They grow up they may come up Muslim or Hindu or whatever. And when they're introduced to Jesus, the story is so revolutionary to them. The gospel is so powerful and has so much meaning to them. It's a lot easier for them to jump in there and just focus on Jesus.
That's right.
Whereas we're so inundated with everything.
That's right.
That I think we get distracted.
The culture, you use the culture to reach the culture. If you don't pay attention, before you know it, you become the culture. And sometimes culture is good, and sometimes culture is ungodly. And that's when it becomes. That's so hard to blur the line. You know, when are we above the culture? When are we in the culture? You know, the way things are done. And if the church isn't growing, which all the statistics demonstrate, the church in America is not growing. We're not. I mean, people are getting born again, but we're losing people in the process. It's telling us something, because that started right at the same time we were starting to do. I believe I'm correct that it started to decline right around the time we started to try to be the culture, and we should be changing the culture. We should be influences in the culture, and how to balance that is an interesting task. And I think it really would depend upon where your ministry was and who your people were. But don't ever stop talking about Jesus, and don't ever stop talking about sin, because sin offends somebody. You can't, because you can't you can't separate sin and Jesus. You can't do it. If you take sin out of the equation, you're really taking Jesus out of the equation. And we don't have the right to redefine Christ. We don't have the right to redefine who he is, what he was like, to make him more palatable to people. He was God in the flesh. He was the second person of the Trinity, just as holy as the Father, and just as worthy to be worshiped with the same respect, with the same reverence as the Father. And we've made him our best friend, you know, and we made him just some guy. And he's not just some guy. He's Jesus. It says the world was created by him, for him, and through him. And he's not just some guy. And we need to, we don't reinvent Jesus. We share them the true Jesus, and we go from there and let God build his church.
Very good. Thank you, Pastor. I think that answers a lot of questions.
I hope so.
Clears up a lot. And I know, like I said, there were some people I think left confused
Yes.
rather than understanding what your point was. And I think that I hope this helps clear that up. So
Awesome. And Bible study tonight, Leviticus 10. We'll go into that a little bit more about God's holiness and how He is the one that decides how we worship Him. And with that, appreciate you guys tuning in. Hope it wasn't too long. I'm looking forward to doing a bunch more. Any questions, comments, put them down at the bottom. We'll do our best to answer them. Any ideas for the next topic would be great also. God bless you.